Wow. Good morning.
Morning. Thanks for showing up.
Yeah, it's always hard to get up early in the second day of D.I.C.E. Yeah, people come to D.I.C.E. It's a great networking event, right? So stay long, drink hard.
I saw that we were scheduled for 10 a.m. I thought I did something wrong.
No. I am very happy that because it's a morning, there'll be less people,
Right.
so it'll be very relaxed and talk about anything. I forgot that there are people watching through the internet, Twitch, so we have to behave.
And they didn't have you guys in the hallway at 1:30 last night. Yeah, thank you very much for that party, whatever was going on. But
And like Martin said, that I'm on the board of AIS, so I attended every single D.I.C.E. from the very first one, and you were on the board as well when we started.
Yeah.
And actually, you opened the D.I.C.E., the very first D.I.C.E.
first D.I.C.E. talk.
And back to back with Mark Cerny's legendary talk of method. I don't know if
Is Mark there?
Here.
Mark, you out there?
Networking hard.
Working hard.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Second talk is Mark.
I always enjoyed, in the audience and listening to the people talking about creativity and how they do things. And I'm on the board, so a little bit kind of unfair, but D.I.C.E. has always been my favorite show event in the industry because there's a very little, no pressure, no business pressure, right? We are not announcing new, title or new hardware or, no PR people.
We're not supposed to.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to do that.
Talk about, so, this year's theme is without boundaries, but for me, D.I.C.E. has always been without boundaries of these, business or platform, and so I always enjoy being in the audience and listening to very creative people, and I was not expecting to be on this side, but the Martin saw the piece I did with Mark Cerny last year, the conversation with Mark at the Computer History Museum. Actually, that museum is amazing. It's all archives of history of
computers. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, and we didn't have script. We just had conversations. Mark and I worked for the last over 20 years, and we are talking about our history, and we surprised with each other. So Martin liked that format and asked me to do something like that, but with of course new partner, and his idea was to talk about last 20 years of industry, how it evolved, and how we look at the future. At the same time, he knows that I'm a big fan of indie games and how we see this boom of indie going. And so 20 years back of history and being indie, I didn't think a better person than you, so I asked you to be my partner this morning, and thank you for accepting.
Thank you.
And the rule is, so I know you have some list of questions, but,
yeah, I do.
But I don't know what you have.
They sent me these emails that some hacker, I guess, sent me history of stuff, so we have some great things to go over. Okay.
Yeah, I'm very interested.
Okay. Well, let's start at the beginning.
Yes.
So let's start at the beginning. And so 1986, you started Sony Computer Entertainment.
1986, I joined Sony Corporation.
Sony Corporation?
I joined Sony Corporation, and 1993, we started, PlayStation, Sony Computer Entertainment. So I was doing some corporate staff kind of, junior level work for Sony, and I was doing some PC business at Sony. Sony was doing a portable game, a portable computer for Apple. It was called PowerBook 100. It was designed and manufactured by Sony. So I was in that team when I had the chance to interview Ken Kutaragi when Ken was working on the original PlayStation. And I was the very first non-technical person to join because Sony was came as considering to move it from R&D stage to business stage.
Yeah.
And the company, Sony Computer Entertainment, was formed in November 1993 as a joint venture of Sony and Sony Music. And now, talk about the beginning of PlayStation or Sony Computer Entertainment. It's a funny story. So I quit Sony as an employee to join Sony Computer Entertainment. And I was thinking, I'm leaving Sony, right? And
Yeah.
Sony people, HR people are very, very nice. When, as soon as you leave a company, you are a customer, right?
Yeah.
So they treated me very well. They gave me some, small lump sum payment. So I didn't even expect I would work again in the Sony headquarters, which is where our office is, because Kaz is now, president of Sony, that we never ever kind
Right.
of dreamed about.
And that's so.
So it's a history of video game industry and PlayStation for me, but it also the relationship between PlayStation and Sony has dramatically changed.
Completely.
Completely.
So I
changed.
remember having dinner with the Sony music executive in LA who was laughing at the whole idea of PlayStation in 1993. And
at that time, you were still in the film industry.
Yeah,
You
but
were doing computer animation.
we were doing computer animation at Rhythm and Hughes at the time. And he did not understand that there was a royalty of at the time around $7 a unit for every CD manufactured, and the music business saw nothing like that, right? So that was pretty interesting. But so when you started with Sony, and particularly PlayStation, so as far as people in the game business, most people work their way up, right? They start as a tester or a modeler or a production assistant, but that's not how it went for you.
For me personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when the company was formed in 1993, I joined the, what we now call third-party relations team for the Japanese industry.
Yeah.
So I was doing some business relations work for the Japanese publishers like Namco, Konami, Squaresoft, those companies. And I did it for 3 or 4 years. And we had, I don't know if you people in the West knew that we had a slogan, marketing slogan in Japan about original PlayStation, that every game comes to PlayStation. we were the new entrants, right?
Right.
Like a lot of industry people didn't treat us, took us seriously. Many people advised, because different electronics companies, consumer electronics companies before us, came into video game business and went out. So they thought Sony would be the same. Many of them, except for Namco, who had a great 3D arcade tech, they are not leveraging their games and tech in consumer. So they are the perfect match for us.
Yeah.
And can form the very strong relationship with the Namco people. But most of the industry at that time were saying something like, well, 3D, polygons, it might work for racing game or maybe shooter, but it won't work for other type of games.
We had not made games before.
Yeah.
Abe's Oddyssey.
Yes.
And but what we were waiting for was 600 megabytes of storage capacity. And it's funny because I've seen Mark Cerny, who's sleeping at the moment, I've seen him say when he heard that there was going to be 600 megabytes of storage capacity, he said, "My God, what are people going to do with all that capacity?" On the other hand, there was other people waiting to get into the business because 3DO had announced that they were doing 3D. And anyone who actually understood 3D understood how drastically underpowered that system was from day one.
It was
And-
texture animation, right? Like 3D.
Yeah. But that capacity really changed because it allowed us to think like there was real production design capability, that we could start getting into higher resolution character, for ourselves personally, character expression, start bringing more actual Hollywood production designers into the film space and start trying to design IP a little more like how a film studio might, or a television network. And that seemed possible because of the promise of where the specs were on PlayStation 1.
Yeah, so when you started your company, Oddworld, we probably had not announced PlayStation as yet.
You announced it
Oh, okay.
because we started in '94.
94, okay, okay.
Yeah, you announced it, and then it came out shortly thereafter. But that was our timing. I mean, it was really because of that announcement that I was able to convince Sherry McKenna, who's right, the lovely Sherry McKenna in the front row. Thank you for coming, Sherry. Anyone who knows Sherry, it's been a long time since we've seen her at some gaming events. Thank you very much, Sherry. And she's the boss, by the way. Yeah. That was my smartest decision from day one.
Yeah. So I learned that when you started, Sherry was your business partner. Right?
Yes.
But over the years, it changed, somehow.
Now we live together.
Yeah.
With 2 dogs.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. It was, if you've ever worked with your life partner, it's challenging, eh, Sher? Brought lots of challenges, and it's a wonderful thing.
So you time the time that there's a big medium to put your beautiful movies and use create world with 3D graphics.
Yes.
And you have that years of experiences making computer animations for the film industry.
That's right.
And what's amazing is you released many games last year on PlayStation, right? Thank you very much.
The old games and brought them back.
Yeah. But
Thank
that
you
means
very much.
You own the IP of these games.
Yes.
Was it that throughout, from the very beginning, or did you acquire back some of their games?
We started with financing of 49% of the company. And thank you, Sherry McKenna, because she was able to get 51.
Wow.
And if not for that, I don't think we'd be here today.
So she was the business person, you were the creative.
Yes, and she was one hell of a negotiator. Yeah. And she was an awesome producer. And what we knew from coming from Hollywood was teams are getting bigger, it's going to get more complicated to produce. We actually hung our hat on that and said, we know how to produce large productions. We know how to do this and that. And then I had a fairly decent, albeit largely hypothetical, game rap to try and convince people I might actually know how to build a game, which I didn't know, but I was trying to convince people I did. And then we learned the hard way, doing it. But yes, it was the promise. What I saw in the industry at the time, and when you guys were announcing, was that at the time, sequels was not a real big business. And in fact, publishers looked at sequels as if they only do 50. I remember hearing this several times. They only do 50% of the sales of the original. And so they were looking at it more like a toy industry. And I said, my God, they don't understand IP. And all that's going to change. And what I remember trying to convince Sherry was we need to get in before they really understand it's about IP. And we got to try and own that IP before we really get in too deep. And if we can do that, maybe we can be around for 20 years and still building on that IP. It didn't go exactly like that. But we're still around.
I remember I visited your studios in San Luis Obispo at that time, right. Late 90s. With Andrew House, that time Andy was VP of marketing for SCA, and I was amazed the wall full of very high, quality graphics, and it's like a common now that to create the world, before making games, but it was totally mind blowing for me that a developer does it, beyond what's necessary to create the first game. That was so like a visionary thing for your team to do.
It was true, but not so blown away because we didn't get signed up.
Yeah, so Andy, because yes, yeah. So I was a producer, managing studio in Japan at that time, and Andy wanted me to accompany him to see what you're doing, meet with the team. Because that time after the first 2 games or so, you were exploring a new a partnership arrangement.
It's a very polite way to put it.
Yes. Yeah. So Andy, I remember strictly asked me on our way back how Oddworld, the world would attract Japanese audience. Because at the time, still Japanese market was doing well, and there's an interest to attract. And I said, I remember I felt that it's so great, inspiring art, but something about those characters who had the organs of humans exposed.
It wasn't trending at the moment?
That was gross.
Well, we were trying to cut. This is true. And, but what we were trying to do is we were trying to distinguish ourselves. I mean, we had no reputation, no history in the game business, and we were trying to create IP that would cut through. And at the time, it was all, super muscle bound. Like that trend of violence and muscle and intensity was coming up. And women, in games was coming up. In a very inflated way.
But for the Western market, it's a kind of perfect kind of games we, kind of wanted on PlayStation, because it was very fascinating to hear Tom yesterday about how Sega positioned Genesis at the higher age audience. But I remember we really wanted to make games more, for everyone, like adults. That's how we named the company, not Sony Game Entertainment, named it Sony Computer Entertainment. And so we really marketed, for the adults.
And this was the beginning of you producing games? As a game producer?
Well, that was the marketing side of the business. I was still doing the third-party relations.
Right.
Yeah,
but as we got to '94, PlayStation's releasing, you had, I believe, your first producing property was Crash.
Crash Bandicoot.
Crash Bandicoot.
Yeah.
Your first producing.
Yeah. So going into business, people ask how I can get into business. In my case, I was offered to become a producer of Crash Bandicoot. And that was signed up by SCA with Universal Interactive Studio that Mark was, producing. And because the deal was for the global market, SCE Japan at that time needed to assign someone to produce. And unfortunately, none of the producers there then spoke English. So I had a chance that, this Shu guy in the TPR, he speaks English, let him try. And
to deal with those crazy guys in America.
Yeah. I remember Barney Storer, when I arrived at the E3, pre-E3, just preparing for E3 of the 1996, I think. Yeah, so we had a meeting, internal meeting, and as soon as Barney saw me at the hotel, he called me that don't screw up.
Bernie, full of encouragement.
Okay. So I have known that this guy assigned in Japan had never produced game is doing this important project.
And American and European designers weren't taking that seriously in Japan at that time.
Well, but Japan had been a very, very tough market to tackle because of a different cultural preference. Japan is very heavy on the manga, comics, and anime influence, and they love these cute anime style characters. And it's funny that the Japanese developers try to grow up from them and try to appeal to the US and European audience, and in most cases, didn't go well at all. And finding that doing what they do well actually appeals to the new audience in US and Europe.
So you also started around the same time producing Spyro?
Well, it was a multi-product deal between SCA and Universal that included Crash and Spyro. I remember 3 games deal for both. And so I started as a localization producer for these properties. At the same time, I was given the chance to grow the internal studio.
And that was Gran Turismo, the first one, right?
Yes. Well, So at that time, the SC Japan had only one team who just released the second Motor Tune Grand Prix game on PlayStation. And so they just started working on their third title. Right. That was Gran Turismo. Right? So I was given Naughty Dog, Max Sony title, Crash Bandicoot.
Those are your 3 first producing games.
Yeah.
That I just want to comment.
Yeah,
that have sold 150 million units combined.
It's very difficult, to get into the business, right?
Yes, but I spoke to Ted Price. I spoke to Jason Rubin.
Yeah.
I didn't get to speak to the folks.
So I mean, that I was extremely lucky,
Well, that's how they feel.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, it does not sound like they're talking about their publisher. Now, I'm not saying developers have anything negative to say about publishers, but it does not sound like they're talking about a publisher relationship, because the fact is that all of them are fiercely protective of their creative. They're strong personalities. They've been doing this forever. But they credit you with the ability of being able to translate for them into the Japanese culture and back on what they needed to do to be more appealing overall. For character designs, from eyebrows, the way things smiled, from teeth, the size of eyes, all of these things that they were married to, and somehow you were slipping in the feedback, but not making them feel enforced to take it, but empowering them to sort of jujitsu them into their believing that that was the right thing without resistance. And they credit you with being able to shape them towards massive success, and Cerny too. But you in particular, because they said, if not for Shu really championing us inside Sony, in Japan, and speaking Japanese, understanding their culture, but being able to basically facilitate between creatives, engineering, and business minds. And they didn't believe in testing, none of them at the time. And introducing them to testing and the idea that maybe they should do that maybe it would be a good thing, 150 million units later.
What great thing about those best developers, they demand the best from every part of the business to participate in the project. So I learned a lot, especially people like Mark, super sharp. We have to prove, right? We just cannot make random idea or opinion. So I brought in, when I was. It was toward the end of the project for Crash Bandicoot 1 when we were brought in. And that was a great game, but a bit, simple game. Very, very fun game, but well, toward the end, very, very difficult because the variety of things you can do is limited. The game designer had to make it, difficult towards the end. So to prove the point, I did the research on some of the Nintendo game of that time. Each level, I looked at and how many new items or new actions were introduced. This level had this and that kind of macro analysis, like everything in hand, and brought it that. But comparing to these games, and this game looks a bit simplistic, and because of that, probably very, very hard in the end. And that kind of thing. And also the testing. To prove the point, we brought in consumers, and that we learned actually from the Japanese industry. Nintendo had a really, really good playtesting team, like a partner, that they offered to their third parties of that time, working on Super Nintendo games, to do the really thorough playtest. And because we are new in the industry, when we visited the third parties of Japan, that I was the responsible. We got a lot to learn from these good practices.
Here's a question that I have, because you went to Kyoto University and you got your Bachelor's of Science. Then you went to UCLA and you got a Master's in Business. And I think a number of us were curious, like, which school had the hotter girls?
Sorry?
Which school had the hotter girls?
Which school?
Which school had hotter chicks, man? Where was the... Kyoto University's business. Is science. UCLA is business. We're curious.
Now the question is?
That's the question.
Kyoto or UCLA? Which I enjoyed more? Or?
Which had prettier girls?
Okay. That was the question. I'm sorry. So the Kyoto University, it's kind of very hard to get into at that time, maybe now as well. So the class of 50 students, maybe we had like 3 or 4 girls.
Oh,
not,
wow.
not that, gods are stupid, or, somehow that was the case. And actually, I got married to one of those.
From
three.
Kyoto?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
all
yeah.
right.
When I was still in
Well, then
college.
that's the answer.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
The smart answer. Yes,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
smart.
Yeah.
But actually, a more serious question on that is, you were traversing creative mindsets, engineering mindsets, business mindsets, cultural mindsets, different territories. But those schools don't teach that. How did you learn this, Shu? How did you learn to manage in such a way that you were able to convince all these different mindsets to work together more synergistically, to be more successful together?
Well, I say I had the gamer mindset, and involved in the making of game was amazing
Yeah.
thing for me.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I talk about this thing when I joined Sony in 1986. 7 years before we started
Yeah.
PlayStation.
Yeah.
Somehow we thought in the future Sony will get into the video game business
Yeah.
because it's basically a computer. And I had that chance, and I was like employee 32, the very first non-tech guy to join the Ken's team.
Wow.
So I really, really, really wanted this to continue, right? The PlayStation, because this is dream job for me, and I had a chance to work on games. Met with Mark, Naughty Dog, Insomniac, Polyphony team, started to grow team. I just wanted to help great game to be made. That's all that I was doing that time.
And I've heard you say something interesting around one of the things that Sony brought really, not the first, but the first successful, I'd say, was CD-ROM in the consoles.
Sorry, before. Yeah,
Yeah.
so your question was how I was doing these things.
Yeah.
So being a producer means that not just talk about games or game design, right? We have to sometimes protect the project, right?
Yes.
Get the funding or, explain to the management other parts of the company. And so I kind of had to learn the languages that they speak so that, they feel like, well, Shu understands the business, he sounds like, so probably it's okay, Yeah, that's what I've been probably doing for the last 20 years.
Right.
That because it's hard, we are very blessed with business people like Andrew House or Sean Layden, who's been doing this for as long as I've been doing, so they understand the process and challenges of making games. But every other years, new people coming from other industries, especially marketers or salespeople, they don't understand why games get delayed, right? Well, they like a film, is made on time, right?
Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah. So they well, why you cannot even finish your game, right?
Yeah.
So it's a challenge always, and I totally understand because they are just trying to do their job right? In terms of making, well, you cannot sell bad games, but marketing and sales can make great games, sell, make it a bigger success. So in order for them to do, they want to use what's available for them, in terms of advertising or retail promotions or partnerships, and it takes many months of I'm talking about retail, like a business, and so many months of preparations. And in the days of PlayStation, we used to release Crash Bandicoot, for example, every year.
Yes.
Right toward the end of the year. So that's great, for the marketers because they know, that predictability on the cycle, that they can maintain the investment on the brand, and they can team up with retailers or potential partners to create long-term promotions. But nowadays games are getting bigger. It was annual cycle on PS1, became 2-year cycles, and now become like a 3-year cycle.
Right.
And the marketers are upset, why can't you release this game every year?
Right.
And so we explain, games are getting more bigger and more complex. But there are some other, there are some reference points for them, like Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed comes out every year, right?
Yeah.
Why can't you do this for us, for our titles?
Yeah.
And I'm like, with all the respect for those teams, like yesterday's talk about how they, created the zombie mode for Call of Duty, great, work. With all respect, but I hate those teams. I wish they are not doing what they are doing well.
So do I.
Yeah.
I just say, God, I hate those guys.
Anyway.
But speaking of getting increasingly more challenging, then we have the PS2.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
So you released 2 titles on PS1.
Yes.
Yep.
But just his comment, this is one of the things I think why we got money in the beginning was that Sherry McKenna was a producer. And she was, in my experience, the most incredible producer I had seen. And one of the things she was promising developers was, as a producer, all I have to do, all I can show you is the end result of this quality, on time, on budget. That's what I deliver. And we actually did that. And it was hard, And
it's hard.
It was very hard, So she got to deliver, and I had to make it happen, But it was very hard. It was hard on all of us. But we did that, and that's to Sherry's credit, because none of the team would have known how to do that, But we had to do the work and follow it.
And the third project you started, for
we
PS2.
started on PS2.
Yep.
And PS2 was, I guess this is when I began to see the designer in a different light, Ken Kutaragi. And what I think, in hindsight, the PS2 era was interesting because it was very difficult for a lot of people. And what it looked like, I used to give the analogy, I was like, gee, it's like Panavision just released a new camera. And it said to film directors and cameramen, this camera is so much better, and you're going to love it because now it takes 5 cameramen to operate it and get on the set and make this happen. I was like, this would never survive. If it was replacing a camera, it would never survive. Now, clearly, the game industry is much more complex than a camera, from Panavision on a film set.
So
but
you moved your project from PS2 to Xbox.
it was survival.
Yeah.
It was survival. We loved PlayStation, but we had to figure out how to pay for it. And what was happening, and
And of course, you didn't do it quietly, right?
No.
You are all over the media talking about.
Well, the press has a tendency to dramatize.
And you invited comment from Jason Rubin, right? What
He
did
called
say?
us lazy, But I got him back. I got him back good.
Okay.
Yeah, I became friends with him.
Oh, that's good.
He's still suffering that retribution.
Yeah, actually,
he called us
so
lazy.
we are on the board of AIS.
Yeah.
We kind of discussed who should be granted the Hall of Fame, Lifetime Achievement, these awards. And one year, Ken was top of the list for the candidate for the Lifetime Achievement. And we are almost anonymous except for one board member who had the reservation, huge reservation. Who was it?
Yeah. Well, I was very opposed to it, but
That's how we have very honest
This is the
discussion. The AIS board is so fun.
we had a lot of fun, and that was the only disagreement we ever had. And it was the first time I ever saw you get passionate about it, because you're going, why? Why? He changed the industry, he changed this. And I said, he put half of the development community out of business. But what it was I'm sure none of you can relate to that.
Actually, you are lucky you are out of video game industry when we launched PS3.
Oh, yeah, I know. I know. Well, that's when I decided to pull out. And we had the opportunity. We were actually financed to be on PS3. But here's the phenomena that I saw happening, because as a third-party independent, you were basically presenting business plans and budgets. And now just think of this connected to Silicon Valley with venture capitalists or something like that. You go out and you convince a publisher, this is what we can do it for, this is how many units we think we can collectively sell together. if you do this and that. But now you're finding out, whoa, we have zero ability to predict, and we just have to discover. Now, to get the financing to even discover, you had to present an entire project with your cost expectations, with your sales expectations, all these things. But what we were finding is that every time that developer had to go back to the publisher, another pound of flesh came out of our deal. And so as developers, we saw a lot of them start getting cut because they weren't coming in on budget. And it made it very, very difficult. And at the same time, games were now really becoming big, right? I mean, remember when it started, when I brought Sherry into the game industry, we would go to parties and she'd say, what do we say we do? And I said, just tell them we make software, because making games was like not going to get you invited to the parties in Hollywood, oh, games. But by the time now PS2 generation's there, games is now like, oh, you make games. I mean, culturally, it really changed in the entertainment business. And, but that ability to not be able to predict was very, very, very difficult. And then what happened was, you really, in some respects, you really opened the door for Microsoft. Because then you had the group up there, you had, Ed and Seamus and these people that were...
New breed of thinking for them.
And what they said was, our hook is we'll build a machine for developers. And when we heard that, we all went, what? Okay, you've got the brand, Microsoft, that people resent having to buy. Historically, Windows and operating systems and all this, and now you want to get in the entertainment business. But if you really do what you're saying, we think you're going to have a brand challenge coming into the entertainment business. No one at that time was thinking of Microsoft as entertainment. But they had the promise to basically make your costs more predictable. And Jason was making fun of us, calling us lazy, but he was first party, so you guys understood, but our publisher didn't necessarily understand this good. And at the same time, fewer winners with bigger numbers, and the publishing community was now really starting to drop off. Right? A lot of publishers were starting to drop off. So they wanted to cut budgets rather than expand budgets, and it left us in a very difficult place. And really the fact was that we were trying to survive. And so Microsoft was a way of landing and trying to survive. And then we got, actually, on time, on budget, we released Munch on Xbox.
The launch.
On launch.
Wow.
And that was challenging. And that's a whole nother talk. But, there's a whole history there. But the point being is that curve of unpredictability then carried over again. Now, PS2, huge success. It carried over again the same philosophy with no, I would call it learning, from the relationships of people that have to build software, carried into the PS3. And when you talk to PS2 developers...
almost, it was the learning from, making a bit, picky, unique hardware that PS2 that, eventually developers, learned how to use. And it actually, it reinforced Ken's vision of, focus on make great, great hardware innovation. Yeah. And in a sense, he had a confidence in these, engineers who, when they see like a high mountain, they just climb, right? Yeah. But that's not for everyone. Yeah. His confidence was those top teams, who would overcome, and that didn't help the philosophy of design.
That's true.
PS3.
Now, Kutaragi, I've heard you refer to Kutaragi as your mentor.
Yeah.
So from outside, it looked like there was a really great relationship happening there. So what was it actually like on the inside?
Well, yeah. So Ken. Well, actually, because I was not his engineering team. Mm-hmm. So I was a little bit, off the side. Maybe he was much nicer to me than his engineering team. I looked at, the discussion. We had a brilliant engineers under Ken, and Ken like handpicked, from Sony. And what they are telling me was every Monday he comes into the office with totally different idea. So when he was directing the team to this way, came back the next week and tell them, who said this? For you to do this. So they already had to predict where he would eventually land. And it's really hard. And I said, this in my talk with computer with Mark at the Computer History Museum that one time when we were having dinner, still small team at the time, Ken said that I know many of you do not like me as a person, but you know that you can do great fun work under me. That's why you are with me, right? And I was like, yes, you are so right.
Maybe there was a party when he retired.
Well, he's much nicer person. He's much happier now. He miss us. He comes to without notice, just walk into our office and ask a couple of questions. And actually, Sony invites him to speak. It's great that a couple of months ago, they invited him to talk to group of engineers that they had to change the venue because there are so many people signed up. People at Sony, clearly looking for some technical vision to be shared.
And he had it.
Yeah, and still he has always maybe 10 years ahead of his time. It's in the business that you cannot be too early or too late, right? You have to be so. We didn't understand what he was saying, and that became the PR message, and I wasn't understanding what our PR teams, our spokesperson of that time was saying. But in retrospect, after 10 years, what he was saying actually makes sense. That happens. So, but yeah, he's big into the cloud, computing. He has his small venture, and he was talking about all these changes, and these changes kind of allow a company who is underdog can still become relevant, like a leapfrog.
And
that was his
early
point.
through PlayStation, there seemed to be no desire for anything old. Everything was about showing. This is a trend in consoles in general, showing the new chips, showing the new capacities, showing the new ray tracing, whatever it was, right, the physics. It was always pushing that. And but as you got into PS3 and you started creating PSN, one of the most unexpected things that we never saw coming because of that trend was you started actually supporting old titles, PS1 titles, on PS3 through PSN.
Yep,
And
digital distribution.
Digital distribution.
Yes.
But as a culture, it did not seem to want any old content at all associated with the content. So it seemed like a seismic shift.
Well,
occurring.
yeah. So my view of my personal view of how we moved on and the industry moved on in terms of I always thought that we had great hardware team like Ken's vision, and we are blessed with great game developers. But there's something in the middle, two things. So this is hardware, and this is contents, games, and here's system software and network services. And these two becomes more and more important from the providing consumers great experiences. And that was actually the focus of our designing PS4. Yeah, because the going through PS3 was the first PlayStation that had the system software update. Kept adding the new features and new services. We started PlayStation Network with PS3. So in my mind, we had a great hardware team. We had global network of great game teams, but we are very behind in the system software engineering and network services that we really want to step up.
Yeah.
And we're still doing.
Well, this is for people like ourselves. This is what it did, and this is what it meant. So when we shut down a studio in 2005, we held on to the rights to all the properties in the games, because we had this faith that digital distribution was coming. I never thought consoles would lead the way. Well, actually, Steam was really leading the way.
Yeah,
and
Steam and iTunes.
And iTunes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that was a big game changer. Right? iPhone in particular as well. Free dev kit. to anyone who wanted it.
Yeah, yeah,
Whoa,
download, just
you know.
download, yes.
And a way to post your own content to sell it directly to the audience. Whoa. A way to actually see the financials. Whoa, without doing a $500,000 audit. You know, without getting into that story. But, so what it did for us was it allowed us to put our old titles from PS1 back on PS3, and more to our surprise, they actually sold. They actually started selling. But really what that did was that allowed us to start investing more, taking old content, getting it on new SKUs. But in particular, we decided it generated enough income that we were able to approach a recent title that we did, New and Tasty. But at the time, we were focusing on New and Tasty for PC. Because we just thought it would be too expensive to try and get it to console. And then something really shocking, I think, happened, and it told us that, and I think a lot of people were experiencing this in different ways, that something had massively changed inside of Sony. And what happened was we did a presentation at Eurogamer on New and Tasty, and we said we're building this game. And we did it on stage, and we showed a little footage, and we did our little nice thing. And then we got a call, and it said, hey, do you guys want some PS4 dev kits? And we're like, this isn't Sony, man. Who are you kidding? Who's messing with us? Because there's no way. If you remember how hard it was to get dev kits, you knew that EA and Activision had 100, but the small guys couldn't get one. You know, it was so hard. I think it was looked at as a profit center. There were $12,000 to $15,000 at times. You know, if you needed 8 of them, it was a significant investment. And all of a sudden, it was like, hey, you guys want to be on PS4? We'll send you a dev kit. And I was like, we're not that important. So what is going on here? What has changed? And simultaneously, we were learning something else, which was that Mark Cerny was now chief architect.
Yep. So Mark was the chief architect of PS4. And what exactly you're talking about, the new breed of Sony SCEA with Adam Boyce, my partner doing
and it was Adam who
sharing
called.
video.
Yes.
Yeah. And in Europe is Shuhei, doing really hard work to get the small devs onto PlayStation, and that was.
We're just about out. We want now. Let's go. We've got about 5 minutes. Did we take 45 or we took 40?
Well,
oh my God. Sure. Well, I guess we've used up our time for Q&A. On time and on budget. There we go. And we're slipping.
We were planning to have some Q&A, but Martin.
Well, sorry, Martin. But here's the year in PS4.
Yep.
Incredible launch.
Yep.
Incredible messaging. Incredible resonating with the consumer and the development community. In particular, a highlight on the indie community. How's that year in retrospect?
Well, we had amazing year. I'm gonna finish, but just let me say. We had amazing year last year. PS4 just kept selling. We announced, unveiled Project Morpheus of VR, very exciting. But toward the end, there are 3 things happened. Like games got delayed. Many industry-wide. Actually, that's the best of the 3. Yeah. Their troubled launch of some big titles, including ours, and the DOS attack to the services and some network service outage. So these are the new big things that keeps me up at night. Yeah. So it was an amazing year we had, but our mind is how we should fix this, and especially the travel launch. This is all development.
Yeah.
We should fix this. That's my final.
My last request, Shu, I hope you write a book someday. I think the whole business would benefit from it. I know I would. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
For spending this time with us today. Thank you.